This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Chanukah. So let's begin today's Shiur with the perhaps the most well-known, or at least the second most well-known question regarding the Yom Tov of Chanukah. We know the Gemara tells us in Masechta Shabbos, Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, probably the two most celebrated words in Talmud Bavli, Mai Chanukah, and the Gemara says the Tan Rabbanan. The Yevanim went into the Heichal, and they defiled all the oil in the Heichal. And when the Chashmonam came in and they prevailed, they were searching, they were looking, and they found one flask of oil was only enough to last for 1 day, and miraculously it lasted for 8 days. L'shano ha'acheres kavam ba'asam yamim tovim behalel behoida. So the question is, why did they need the miracle to last for 8 days? So go make new oil. So the answer is very simple. Either they were tamei meis, and it was going to take 7 days to become tahar, or to get to the north where Shevet Asher was, it was going to be 3 days there, 1 day to make the oil, 3 days back. Okay, but the question is like this. We know the Ribono Shel Olam does not make miracles for naught. God does not like to change nature for no reason. Hashem has to have a mighty good reason to change the laws of nature. When the Ribono Shel Olam created the world, He set the laws of nature into effect, and He likes them to run their course unless He has a very good reason to change them. The question is, why did God have to make a miracle that the tamei oil should last for 8 days? Let them light with tamei oil. After all, we all know, we're all familiar with the principle, Tuma, Hutra, B'tzibur. Tuma is not Hudcha, it's Hutra. And there's a very big difference between Hudcha and Hutra. If Tuma was Hudcha, if the Tuma is just pushed away in the face where the majority of the Jewish people are tamei, then at least it's better, it's preferable, it's ideal to do the avodah b'tahara. However, Tuma Hutra B'tzibur means it's not even a hiddur. It's not better to do it b'tahara. It's not better. You have two guys, one guy's doing it in Tuma, one guy is doing it b'tahara, he's a chassid shaita. What are you doing? Tuma's Hutra. It's not a hiddur to do it b'tahara. And therefore the Pnei Yeshua asks in number 5, Pnei Yeshua, Shabbos, Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, U'lechayra, Yesh L'tmoya, Kol Toirach Hanes Ze Lama. Why the whole bother of the miracle? Da Kaimelan Tuma Hutra B'tzibur. V'hayu Yichaylam Lahadlik B'shemen Tamei. Bishlam Alamadamar D'chuya B'tzibur Nicha. Bishlam of Tuma's Hudcha. Everything's good. Shaper Ktsas. Why? Because then it's a hiddur. At least God made a miracle so that we could do it behiddur. Ma'she'en kein Lamanda Amar Hutra B'tzibur. As opposed to the man, the Amar Tuma is Hutra B'tzibur. Afilu Hadur Lemadrina, and it's not even better, like the Gemara says in Yuma, V'imkein Kusha Tuva. The whole miracle was pointless, it didn't accomplish anything, it wasn't needed, so why did God do it? God doesn't just make miracles. Let's say you're thirsty. I guarantee you it never happened, the cup picked itself up and came to you. You know why? Because it's unnecessary, go get it yourself. God doesn't just make miracles. So in this case, allowing the oil to last for 8 days was completely unnecessary. It had no purpose, so why did God do it? That's question number 1. Question number 2. The menorah is the only thing that's going on in the Beis HaMikdash? You think in that whole building there, with 93 kelim and hundreds of kohanim, the only thing they did all day long is they took a candle and they lit the menorah. What about menachos? What about menachos? They had a number of menachos that they brought every day. Let's say the minchas chavitin. So what do? Obviously they use tamei oil. So if it's good enough for the menachos, it's good enough for the menorah.
But according to Rashi, the mincha oil, the oil for mincha doesn't have to be as pure, or it could be from the second or third beating of the oil. But
there has to be whole, it has to be pure.
So it could be pure, but you could.
They were matami. You think the Yevanim went in and they said, they had a legislation. We're going to look for shemen and touch all the shemen. So they see soiles. They say, no, we're not going to touch that. And they see ayin. No, we're not going to touch. We're just going to touch shemen. What they had an obsession with shemen. They defiled everything. So whatever they used for the menachos, they could have used for the menorah. That's the second question of Pnei Yeshua. The Noid Behuda takes this even further. Noid Behuda in the Drushay Hatzlach, in Drush Lamed Gimel, he says that forget about the menorah, forget about the shemen for the menachos. What about the soilas for the menachos? If the Yevanim went in, they touched everything. They contaminated everything. They ransacked everything. So what kind of soilas did they use for the menachos? They had nesachim that were brought every day. What kind of yayin did they use for the nesachim? They used tamei yayin because the Yevanim defiled everything. So if it was good enough for the nesachim, and tumah hutra b'tzibur worked for the nesachim, and tumah hutra b'tzibur worked for the menachos, then why didn't tumah hutra b'tzibur work for the hadlakas hamenorah? Asked the Noid Yehuda, look at number 6. Va'ani medaktek oid yoiser. You could ask even further. Al ikar hanes. Haloi kamoisha timu kol hashmanim, timu gamkein shara dvarim. They were matame, most likely they were matame everything. V'loi hayolahem loy soilas tar lemenachos, v'loi yet liyayin lenesachim, v'lama. Now, why didn't God make a miracle for the oil? I mean, for the flour. There was only enough flour to last for one day. I think some people think God did make a miracle with the flour. That's why people are eating jelly donuts the whole Yom Tov. No, Rabbi say public service announcement. The miracle was only in the oil. When it comes to jelly donuts, it's best to use the principle Ein lanu reshus lahishtamesh bahem ela l'roisam bilvad. But that's the principle. What?
Jelly donuts are boiled in oil.
Okay, so just drink the bottle while you're at it. Question: the miracle that God did not perform a miracle when it came to the soiles of the menachos. God did not perform a miracle when it came to the yayin for the nesachim. Madua nasa hanes hazeh dafka b'shemen lamar. That's the question of the Noid. So number 1, the whole miracle was unnecessary. Number 2, they used tamei oil for the menachos. Number 3, God didn't make a miracle for the wine. God didn't make a miracle for the flour. Why did He have to make a miracle for the oil? Let's come to the Haftarah of Shabbos Chanukah. Boaz is chalishing to get to the Haftarah. You want to sing it, the first pasuk? Very good. Rani v'simchi b'asiyan ki hineniva. Now, this year we don't have 2 Shabbos Chanukahs. We only have 1 Shabbos Chanukah, but at least we have 2 Monday Chanukahs. What are the chances of that? We have 2 Monday Chanukahs here. We get to have 2 Chanukah Shiurim on Monday. So the Haftarah of Rani v'simchi b'asiyan. Ki hineniva v'shachanti b'seichech nem Hashem v'novu goyim rabim Hashem hayom v'yuli la'am. So this is a very interesting Haftarah that seems to have absolutely nothing to do with Chanukah. Oh yeah! In middle it says that the Navi saw a menorah. So now I have to read 20-something psukim because one pasuk you have the word menorah. I could find you other psukim in Tanakh where the word menorah. I have a question. This Shabbos, we should learn Parshas Truma. You know why? Because it says the word menorah. We should suspend the reading of the regular Parshas. What is the connection between Bechlal? What's this got to do with Chanukah? Furthermore, when there's another Haftarah, when there are 2 Shabbos Chanukahs, so on the second Shabbos Chanukah, if you look at number 2, we learn from Malachim Aleph, Parak Zayin, Vayas Chiroim es hakiyoros, Vayas hayoim, Vayas hamizrakois, Vayechal Chiram la'asois es kol hamalacha, Asher asa, la'melech shloimoi, Beis Hashem. We read about the menorah of King Solomon. Question that all the Rishonim ask is we have 2 possible choices for Haftarahs of Shabbos Chanukah. One from the Navi Zechariah, which the Navi sees the menorah, and one the construction of the menorah in the times of the first Beis HaMikdash in the times of Shloimeh. Who came first, Shloimeh or Zechariah? Shloimeh. What Navi is first, Malachim or Zechariah? Malachim. Asks all the Rishonim, why when there are 2 Shabbos Chanukahs do we first read from Zechariah and then read from Malachim? And when there's 1 Shabbos Chanukah do we only read from Zechariah and we suspend Malachim altogether? Why does Zechariah have precedence? This is the Kasha of the Beis Yosef. So the Beis Yosef quotes the Ran, because of Haran, number 3. Afa gav deneros to Shlomo kedimi, even though the candles of Shlomo come first, afilu hachi adifilan, nevertheless, the Navi of Zechariah is better. The Zechariah mishum de nevuas asidnenu. The Navi Zechariah, he's looking into the future. And the Pasuk in Melachim is talking about the menorah of the past. It's always better to have a haftarah about the future than a haftarah about the past. That's the answer to the Beis Yosef. Nevuah da'asidi adif. That's the answer to the Beis Yosef. The Kolboi, one of the Rishonim, writes that even though the Neros of Shama are first, it is more reasonable to read about the prophecy of Zechariah because Zechariah prophesied in the time of the Bayis Sheni, albeit before the miracle of Chanukah. The miracle of Chanukah took place during Bayis Sheni. Malachim is about Bayis Rishon. Better to read a Haftarah about the same temple in which the miracle of Chanukah occurred, even though the two have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Okay, are these satisfying reasons that the Haftarah of the Navi Zechariah should take precedence? Because it's a prophecy about a 400-year period in which Chanukah was 200 years later, but it was in the same 400-year period as opposed to the Bayis Rishon. And Bechlal, why in the world do we read the Haftarah of Rani V'Simchi Basiyan? We're reading 20 psukim. In one pasuk it says the word menorah, so therefore this is the appropriate Haftarah for Chanukah. How in any way does it connect to the theme of Chanukah? An interesting idea. Parshas Emor. Parshas Emor is the parsha of the Yomim Tovim. So I was saying Hallel this morning, and I got up to Loilanu, and usually you skip Leilanu, and usually you skip a hafti. But luckily, things were working, and I remember today's Chanukah, and you say Hallel Shalem on Chanukah. So I did say Leilanu and a hafti, especially I was dying for the Amud, so it worked out that I did not skip it. And we said Hallel Shalem today, yeah? Yeah, right. And well, who said yeah? Yeah, he's right, right? So the Rambam says Chanukah Yimei Simcha, right? So we say Hallel Shalem. Why do we say Hallel Shalem on Chanukah? The Roikeach has a beautiful remez. In Parshas Emor, the Parsha of the Mayadim, we have listed there in the discussion the Yom Tov of Pesach, followed by the Yimei Sfira, followed by Shavuos, followed by Rosh Hashanah, followed by Yom Kippur, followed by Sukkot. Eile Mayadei Hashem Mikra'ei Kodesh Asher Yisam Mayadam. Fine. And then right after that we have the psukim of Vaydaber Shalom Shalemar Tzavis V'yikchu Elecha Shemen Zayisach. So even though you would expect that there should not be any discussion about the Yom Tov of Chanukah, because Chanukah is Midrabanan, nevertheless, Chanukah, which is Midrabanan, is Merumaz in the immediate aftermath of the Parsha of the Mayadim, V'yikchu Elecha Shemen Zayis Zach. Now, this alludes to the halacha that we need to use pure oil on Chanukah. And it says, Lahalois ner, and then it says, Yaroiches hanerois. It's a remes to Shitas Beis Hillel. You start with one ner, and then you progressively go up. But says the Roikeach, why did the Torah juxtapose Chanukah to Sukkot? We all know the Beis Yosef's kasha. I told you, I was in Lakewood I didn't tell you. I was in Lakewood this past Thursday, so you can't go to Lakewood without going to a Svarim store. If you think Svarim stores are big in Queens, then go to Flatbush. If you think they're big in Flatbush, go to Borough Park. If you think they're big in Borough Park, go to Lakewood. Lakewood, it's Oyoim V'Noira, the Svarim, what's going on over there. So I find out, I've been looking for a while, I got a sefer, the Beis Yosef's Kasha. I used to have Ner Lameya, 100 answers to Beis Yosef's Kasha, 500 answers to the Beis Yosef's Kasha. And the Beis Yosef held they were all wrong, right? So the Beis Yosef Chanukah should be 7 days. The miracle is only 7 days. So one of the answers given is they patterned Chanukah after Sukkot. Just like Sukkot is 8 days, Chanukah is 8 days. Because since in the Torah, Chanukah's remez appears right after Sukkot, just like Sukkot is 8 days, Chanukah is 8 days. And just like Sukkot we say Hallel Shalem, on Chanukah you say Hallel Shalem. Ayan v'noira. Just because in the Torah Chanukah is juxtaposed to Sukkot, therefore Chanukah should be 8 days. Just because Chanukah is juxtaposed to Sukkot, Chanukah we should say Hallel Shalem. What is the connection between Chanukah and Sukkot? Imagine if Chanukah was juxtaposed to Yemei Sfira, how long it would be. But the Roikeach is saying that what's the makar of saying Hallel Shalem for 8 days? The juxtaposition of Chanukah to Sukkot. Why is Chanukah 8 days? The juxtaposition of Chanukah to Sukkot. What's the connection between Chanukah and Sukkot? Furthermore, We all know that we have Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says when you light the Neiros, you go down. Moridin. You light 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beis Hillel says you go up. Malim b'kodesh, ve'in moridin. Right? The Avudraham says Chanukah is Rosh Tevois, Ches Neiros, ve'halacha kebeis Hillel. Right? But Beis Shammai says you go down. Why does Beis Shammai say you go down? So if you look at number 8, the Gemara says in Shabbos, Taima de Beis Shammai kineged parei hachag. It corresponds to the bulls of Sukkot. On Sukkot, you bring on day 1 13 bulls. Day 2, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Total of 70 bulls. Kineged the Shivim Umayis HaOlam. So too, says Beis Shammai, when you light the menorah, you're supposed to go down, 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 down. What in the world is the connection between the bulls of Sukkot and the Yom Tif of Chanukah? Just because the bulls of Sukkot you go down, what does Chanukah got to do with Sukkot? Now we just saw Chanukah is juxtaposed to Sukkot, but on a deeper level, why are we patterning Chanukah after the Yom Tif of Sukkot? What is the connection between the two?
That's the answer, no?
What?
Because it's Samuch, that's what he said.
Okay, but what's the connection between the two? Furthermore, listen to this. Watch this. Watch this. Look at number 9. From the Sefer HaChashmonaim. When they were victorious, listen to what they legislated. And listen to how they celebrated in the first year. V'yachoygu es Chanukas HaMizbeach Shmoine Yomim. V'yalu b'simchas libam oilois uzvachim l'roiv. V'yizkaru Yomim Mikedem. And they remembered the days of yore. When they celebrated Sukkot, when they hid in the caves and in the underground like animals. So they said, let's celebrate now Chanukah just like Sukkot, and we're going to celebrate Ba'arvei Nachal, Ba'anofei Eitz Avos, Ba'anofei Hodor, Kapois Tamarim, and we're going to sing Shira. The Megillas, the Sefer Chasham writes that when Chanukah was first celebrated, they said, we remember the great celebrations of Sukkot when we were hiding out. So let us celebrate Chanukah just like Sukkot, 8 days with Hallel, Daled Minim. In the first year, Chanukah was celebrated with Daled Minim. Now that was never legislated. But that would seem rather odd. Why in the world would they take a lulav and an esrog? Can you imagine? Imagine what Main Street would look like. Menorahs and Daled Minim, there would be... instead of talking about a gama laden with pishtin knocking into the menorah, we're talking about a guy doing nanuim knocking into the menorah. But apparently, originally there was some kind of rationale to try to celebrate the Yom Tif of Chanukah with the Daled Minim. Why would they do that? So let's try to understand, what did the Yevanim try to accomplish? What were they aiming for? What was their goal? And how did we overcome them? Now we discussed this a little bit last week, but we're going to take a different angle this week. In Megillas Antiochus, in Pasuk Lamed Aleph, it says that Antiochus says, let's try the following. Havanale aleim, we're going to come upon them. Unavato mehem habris hameshuleshes, we're going to nullify the 3-part covenant. Asher karas lahem Eloheim, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Mila. Okay, they wanted to be Vato Shabbos. They wanted to be Mevato Rosh Chodesh, and they wanted to be Mevato Mila. Now, what do these 3 things have in common? You know, a bris. What's the bris of Shabbos? There's a bris of Rosh Chodesh. There ain't no bris of Rosh Chodesh. What is the common denominator of these 3 things? Obviously, they wanted to harm us. They wanted to take us away from Judaism. So say worship Avodah Zarah, talk by Chazar Sashas, which is a Gadol Avonim Asai, and pick another one, do something else like that. But why Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Mila? Now, what's most troubling is the fact that in the Medrash, when the Medrash records what the Yevanim try to do, the Medrash leaves out all these 3 things, and the Medrash only mentions one particular gezerah. If you look at number 10, Reb Shimon ben Lakish Pasar Karya Bagalias. The Medrash comments that the pasuk va'aretz ha'sasoyu va'voyu v'choyshech al pnei sa'im v'rach lekim rachefes al pnei hamayim refers to the Dalet Golios. Soyu refers to Bavel, Vayu refers to Madai, Choyshech refers to Galos Yavan, And the Tahayim refers to the Mamleches Harisha. Let's talk about Choshech for a moment. It says the Medrash, very well known, the Choshech is Malchus Yavan, Shehechshichu, Eineim Shel Yisrael B'Gzeiraseim. They darkened our eyes with their decrees, and they enforced that we have to write and scribe on the horn of an ox, Ein lochem chelek v'elekei Yisrael. We have no share in the God of Israel. So we had to take some kind of knife and etch onto the horn of an ox that we have no connection to God. We're not connected to God. The Rambam writes in the Geras Teiman, we had to write this on our clothing, and we had to write this on our oxen, and we had to plow for it, and the Gezer was in effect for 52 years, says the Rambam. 52 years. Why doesn't the Medrash say that? Why does the Medrash say they made us write on the horn of an ox? We have no share in the God of Israel. The Medrash should have said they abolished Shabbos, they abolished Milah, they abolished Rosh Chodesh. No, the Medrash doesn't say a word about that. The Medrash just says we had to write on the horn of an ox. We have no chelek in God. So how do you reconcile the Medrash with what it says in Megillas Antiochus? So the Chidah says something very beautiful. The Chidah says that there is a common denominator between these three mitzvahs, and actually these three mitzvahs being connected goes back to this week's parsha, Parshas Miketz, where the Jewish people were going down to Egypt. The Klal Yisrael had, the brothers of Yosef were going down to retrieve him, to meet him, ultimately to settle there in Goshen. And Yosef is, so to speak, preparing the Jewish people for their stay in Mitzrayim. And after all, we know God told Yaakov Avinu, Anochi ered imcha Mitzrayima, v'anochi ala imcha gam aloi. I'm going to come up with you as well. So Yosef is thinking to himself, if God is going to come down with us to Mitzrayim, and He's going to come and ascend with us out of Mitzrayim, then we have to make Mitzrayim hospitable to the Ribono Shel Olam. We have to make ourselves and Egypt a makom of hashras Shechinah. And therefore Yosef paved the way and prepared that Klal Yisrael should be worthy to be Kalim, to be a resting place for the Shekhinah. Says the Chidah, there are three mitzvahs that we have that are mashre the Shekhinah on Klal Yisrael. Number one, Chodesh. Chodesh is the mitzvah that causes God to reside with the Jewish people. As we say in the Nusach of Kiddush Levana, Il mole lo yizachu ela lahakpil pnei avim shabashamayim pamachas b'chodesh dayam. The mitzvah of the Chodesh demonstrates that the Ribono Shel Olam resides with us, rests with us. The mitzvah of Shabbos, the Zohar says in Kunei Zohar, V'shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos l'doiroisam al tikri l'doiroisam ela l'dirasam. It creates a dira for God. God is able to live with us through the mitzvah of Shabbos. And Bris Milah also, the Chidah cites the Alshich HaKadosh writes that through the mitzvah of Bris Milah, the Ribono Shel Olam we are able to be a merkava for the Shekhinah. So through these three mitzvahs, through Milah, through Chodesh, through Shabbos, we create a makom for Hashem to dwell His Shekhinah with us. What does it mean, the Shekhinah? God is everywhere. Malay chal haaretz kavoday. Less asar panumine. There's nothing vacant of God. But there's a certain concentration of Hashem's hashgacha pratis and Hashem's ahava, which is called the Shekhinah. It's an extra manifestation of the hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there are various levels of Shekhinah. For example, we say that in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, there was no Shekhinah. And at the same time, we say the Shekhinah never leaves the Kaisel HaMaravi. There are different levels of Shekhinah. 10 Jews bring the Shekhinah. 22,000 Jews bring the Shekhinah. 600,000 Jews bring the Shekhinah. There are many different levels of Shekhinah. But primarily there are three mitzvahs that bring the Shekhinah. Chodesh, Milah, and Shabbos. And therefore in this week's Parsha, in preparation for our descent to Egypt, in preparation for the Yom Tov of Chanukah, Yosef orders the Chimesh es Eretz Mitzrayim. Chimesh is Rosh Tevos, Chodesh, Milah, and Shabbos, says the Chidah. Because Yosef knew if God's going to come down with us, He has to be comfortable. We have to be hospitable to Him. That will only occur through the observance of Chodesh, Milah, and Shabbos. And therefore the Yevanim, they wanted us to feel that we were not connected to God. They wanted us to feel that the Shekhinah did not rest with us. So what did the Yevanim do? They said, don't observe Chodesh, don't observe Mila, don't observe Shabbos. In effect, there's no stira between the Medrash and Megillas Antiochus. They made us write on the horn of an ox that we're not connected to God. Ein lanu chelek b'elokei Yisrael. How did they go about achieving that? By abolishing Chodesh, Mila, and Shabbos. Because Chodesh, Mila, and Shabbos allows the Shechinah to dwell with us, allows us to have a chelek in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so therefore they wanted us to feel we have no chelek with Hashem. Especially, by the way, the Pnei Yeshua points out, what is the symbol? Yeah? Yeah, have a good day. I hope everything's up. Okay, so what makes us feel that the Shechinah still dwells in Klal Yisrael? What is the symbol that the Shechinah rests with us? The Gemara says in Shabbos, Chav Beis Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Michutz laparoiches ha'edos ya'aroich. The Gemara in Shabbos, number 14, says, why do we light the menorah? Does God need the light? Kachashecha ka'ira. God sees in the dark like He sees in light. What's the purpose of the menorah? Says the Gemara, the ner maravi. The Gemara asks, why did we need the menorah? It was Eidos l'bayei olam shashchina shayra b'Yisrael. What's the Eidos? Amarav zunem maravi. That miraculously the Ner Maravi burned and burned and burned and burned and never extinguished and never waned and never diminished at all. It burned strongly for hundreds of years until in the era of the Chashmonaim, in the era of the Yevanim, in the times of Shemonat Tzaddik, the Ner Maravi began to flicker. And it went out. It is not well known that in the preparation for the decrees of the Yevanim, of the Greeks, the Ner Maravi would sometimes go out. In the era when the Yevanim came in, when the Yevanim gained sovereignty, the Ner Maravi was not burning anymore. Now, if the Ner Maravi was symbolic of the fact that the Shechinah was showing Klal Yisrael, and now the Ner Maravi goes out, what does that tell us? Well, how does that make us feel? That makes us feel that Ein lanu chelek b'elokei Yisrael, exactly what the Yevanim wanted to accomplish. The Yevanim said, look at the Ner Maravi. God used to be with you, but He's not with you anymore. He's done with you. You have no chelek b'elokei Yisrael. We're not going to let you keep Chodesh. We're not going to let you keep Mila. We're not going to let you keep Shabbos. Yosef is long gone. Yosef was compared to the Shar. He allowed the Shechinah to return to the Jewish people. But you guys are one and done. Therefore, ride on the horn of the ox. The ox represents Yosef. Forget Yosef. Yosef is over with. You have no Chodesh, you have no Mila, you have no Shabbos. The Shechinah does not rest with you anymore. The Shechinah is not Shiur and Klal Yisrael. Therefore, Klal Yisrael were reeling. Klal Yisrael were demoralized. Klal Yisrael said, Ein lanu ela ha'aras panim. What's life worth if the Rebbeinu Shalom is not with us anymore? So the Rebbeinu Shalom, says the Pnei Yeshua, absolutely did not have to make a miracle. Halachically, there was no need to make a miracle. Halachically, it was not better to do it b'tahara. It was not a hiddur, it was a nicer. Like some people come, Rav, is it mutter or mutter? Is it better? No. But is it an Inyan? That's a good. Halavai people should ask, is it an Inyan not to steal? Yes, it's an Inyan not to steal. It's also a lav in the Torah. But what people care more about an Inyan than a Doraisa. So not only is it not a Doraisa to light B'tara, it's not even an Inyan. It's not an Inyan. So why did Hashem do it? Says the Pnei Yeshua, the Rebbeinu Shalom did it for one reason and one reason only. The Yevanim wanted us to feel that we have no chelek b'elokei Yisrael, and the Shechinah is not with us. They said, evidenced by the fact that the Ner Maravi is extinguished. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said, I'm going to make a miracle with the menorah. The menorah is symbolic of the fact that the Shechinah, Shayra, and Klal Yisrael, I'm going to make a miracle that the Yevanim are wrong. Yesh lachem chelek b'elokei Yisrael. I'm going to show that you do have a share. The Shechinah does rest with you. It was not halachically necessary. It was not required. It was not a hiddur. It was not better. It was only to demonstrate one thing. Hashras Hashchina b'Yisrael. We call it the return of the Shechinah. The Shechinah left us. Yes, the Shechinah left. The Ner Ma'aravi went out. We couldn't observe Chodesh. We couldn't observe Milu. We couldn't observe Shabbos. But now the Rebbeinu Shalom made a miracle, says in the Pnei Yeshua number 17. Lekach nira de'ikar hanes lo'inasa ela lo'hidia lohem chibas hamakam aleim, was only to show the great love Hashem has for us. Keda'ashkechan, we find that a miracle happened in the Karban Tamid, that the Omer was never a puzzle, and in the Shtei HaLechem, there was a miracle that it was always correct. Therefore, since the Yevanim wanted us to write on the Karen Ashur Shein Lachem Chelik B'Ilgei Yisrael, and they made many shmados, and now we were redeemed, Nasalam Neis Gadol Shesholtu Lekach Nasam Gam Keinei Zeh Binyan HaNeiros Shu Eidus LeYisrael Shashina Shchayra B'Hem. Like we say, the Ner Ma'aravi never went out, but in the time of Shimon HaTzadik, even the Ner Ma'aravi sometimes went out. Therefore, Hashem wanted to show that L'Hidia Shechazru L'Chibasan Harishayna, that the original love was back to full force. Okay. So let's try to think about one thing. Here they are in the times of Chanukah. They experienced the greatest devastation, the abandonment of the Shechinah. The Ner Ma'aravi went out. They felt that we had no share in the God of Israel. They made us be oiker, the achievement of Yosef HaTzadik. But now the Shechinah returned. Now they had a miracle in the menorah to demonstrate one thing. The Shechinah is back. So how do you make a Yom Tif to celebrate the return of Shechinah after the absence of Shechinah? There was one time in history earlier that the Shechinah left us. We were coming out of Egypt, and we were being protected by the clouds of glory. The clouds of glory were the Shechinah. And we know we commemorate the miracle of the clouds of glory on Sukkot, on Tesvav Tishrei. And the Vilna Gaon asks, why do you commemorate on Sukkot? The clouds of glory appeared right when we left Mitzrayim on Tesvav Nisan. Says the Vilna Gaon, we don't commemorate miracles. We're not going to commemorate the fact that we had clouds of glory take us out of Egypt. That was just a miracle. We don't just commemorate miracles. But says the Gra, here's what happened. Hashem took us out of Egypt on Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. We're standing at Har Sinai. Moshe says, I'll be right back. 40 days, mark it on your calendar. So we all set our alarms. 40 days later, the alarm's going to go off in the middle of Shiur. Everything's going to stop, right? So, and the 40th day comes, all the alarms go off. Hey, where's Moshe? Nah. They look up in the sky. Moshe's lying in a bed, a mess. And Moshe's done. So they said, let's make an egel. And they made an egel. And they served the egel, and they look up to the heavens, and that great cloud said, see you later, guys. We're out. Rebbeinu Shalom says, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. So who's going to lead us? I'll send an angel. First Hashem wanted to destroy Klal Yisrael. So Hashem said, look, I won't destroy them, but I go my way, they go their way. I'm going to send Matatron. I'll do my thing, they do their thing. I can't be with them anymore. So Moshe said, no, we can't do this. So Hashem said, no, Salachti Kivarecha, I forgive them. I forgive them. So Klal Yisrael expected that when Hashem said, Salachti Kivarecha, the Anani Yaakov is going to come back. They look up, the Anani Yaakov is gone. They go to Moshe. Moshe says, God forgave you, but he doesn't love you. You know, you have a friend, you used to hang out together, you used to go to pizza together, and you insult him. He says, I'm not moichel you, he's baroiges at you. Erev Yom Kippur, he asks you for mechila. So you moichel him. So the next day you call him up. Let's go out. No, I don't like you. I'm moichel you, but I don't like you. I'm not interested in going out with you. I'm machalach. You go to your place, I go to my place. So just because somebody's moichel you doesn't mean his original love is back. So Moshe was thinking, what should we do? He tells Rebbeinu, look, Rebbeinu Shalom gives us a command to build a Mishkan, Yud Aleph Tishrei. We bring the Davos, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel. Yud Daled, Vayikalei Ha'amei Havi. Tes Vav Tishrei! The return of the Shechinah. The return of the Anani Yaakov. Zman Simchaseinu. A time of joy. What's the joy? The joy that after Mechila we achieve the higher Madrega, that Chazru L'chibasan Harishayna. Sukkot, says the Gra, is not a celebration of the miracle of Anani Yaakov, it's a celebration of the return of the Anani Yaakov. So when Klal Yisrael in the times of Chanukah were reeling after losing the Shechinah, after Ner Rabbi went out, after lack of observing Chodesh Milan Shabbos, and they want to establish a Yom Tov to commemorate the return of the Shechinah. What is the best and only paradigm we have of how to establish a Yom Tov, of how to celebrate the return of the Shechinah? The answer is Chanukah is an exact replica of the Yom Tov of Sukkot. Just like Sukkot, after the Chet HaEgel, the Shechinah returned to us, so to Chanukah, after the extinguishing of the Ner Ma'aravi, the Shechinah returned to us. The Yevonim wanted us to write on the Keren of the Shar. Why the Keren of the Shar? Because there's another Shar in our history. Alu Shar, Ale Shar. The Egel. The Yevonim said, you're over. The Shechinah's gone. Remember when you made the Egel and the Shechinah left you? We're doing this again. No Chodesh, no Milah, no Shabbos, right in the horn of an axe. Ein lochem chelik b'Yisrael. You're confirming that the Egel is who you are. And the purpose of the return of the miracle of the oil is to show we overcame the Egel the first time and we're overcoming it again. And therefore, Chanukah midrabanan in the Torah appears right after the Yom Tov of Sukkot. And just like Sukkot is 8 days, Chanukah is 8 days. And just like Sukkot we say Halal Shalom, Chanukah we say Halal Shalom. Because just like Sukkot commemorates the return of the Shechinah, Chanukah celebrates the return of the Shechinah. And therefore the first year of Chanukah, they celebrated Mamish B'Daled Minim. They took Daled Minim to indicate we've accomplished again what Sukkot did is Mamish Masei Avos Simin Labanim, that we could fall to the level of Ein Lochem Chelek B'Lekei Yisrael, but the Rebbe Hashem says no, L'Hoidia Shechazru L'Chibasan Harishayna. Says in Noid Yehuda, the flour, they use Tamei flour. The wine, they use Tamei wine. The Minchas Chavitin, they use Tamei oil. Because we did not need to use tahar, because tumah tzibur, it's not even a inyan. But it wasn't even an inyan to use tahar oil for the menorah either. But the menorah represents, it's Eidos Yisrael, Shehashchina, Shara Yisrael. Hashem didn't make the miracle because He needed to, because it was better, because it's halachically preferable. It was only to demonstrate the return of the Shechinah. And therefore Beis Shammai says, Moiridin b'kodesh. Just like the Parei HaChag on Sukkot, you light the menorah to parallel most closely all the rituals of Sukkot. That's the connection between Hadlakas HaMenorah and the Parim of Sukkot. Marv Rabbi, according to what we've learned, Rebbe Hashem has given us a great matana, a magnificent understanding of the Haftarah of Shabbos Chanukah. We do not read Rani V'Simchi merely because it says the word menorah in Rani V'Simchi. That helps. It probably helps. But that I don't believe is the real reason. The reason we read the Haftarah of Rani V'Simchi on Chanukah is because the Haftarah of Rani V'Simchi expresses the entire theme of Chanukah. Rani V'Simchi b'asiyayin ki hineniva v'shachanti b'soichech no'am Hashem. The Hashras Hashchina. Nachamal, the second pasuk. V'novu goyim rabim Hashem hayoymahu v'hayu li le'am v'shachanti b'soichech v'yadat ki Hashem tzvakosh. And I, the Yevonim, said, Ein lachem chelek b'kei Yisrael. No, it's nonsense. V'nachal Hashem es Yehuda chelkoi al admas hakodesh. Nah, Rebbe Hashem rejected the temple. No. Uvacharoid b'Yerushalayim. That's the reason we read this Haftarah. It's not a matter of menorah, so then there's a kasha. Why this menorah, why not? This is Asad Lavai. The main theme of the Haftarah of Shabbos Chanukah expresses the objective of why the Rebbe Hashem made a miracle for us, and that is to reinforce and confirm that we could fall to the madrega of Ein Lachem Chelek B'Lekei Yisrael. We could reinstate the Chet HaEgel, and the Rebbe Hashem could return to us in the same way He did in the times of Sukkot. And therefore Chanukah is paralleled after Sukkot. It's 8 days, Halal Shalom. And just like perhaps Sukkot is Man Simchaseinu, the Rambam in fact writes that Yemei Chanukah are Yemei Simcha as well. So wishing everyone Lichtigen Chanukah and Freilichen Chanukah. Shkayach.
Thank you.
So we have this great Yom Tov of Chanukah, which is patterned after the Yom Tov of Sukkot. But there's one more very profound connection, and that is, we have a tradition that Yaakov Avinu passed away on Sukkot. In fact, the Torah writes in Siman Taf Yud Zayin that the 3 Yomim Tovim correspond to our 3 Avos. Pesach corresponds to Avram Avinu, because the Malachim came to greet and be Mevaser Avram Avinu on Pesach. Shavuos corresponds to Yitzchak, because the Shofar of Matan Torah came from the Ayel of Yitzchak. And Sukkot corresponds to Yaakov. But amazingly, Yaakov Avinu passed away on the first day of Sukkot. And 30 days they mourn Yaakov after his 40 days of embalming. So a total of 70 days of mourning. So from the first day of Sukkot, which is the Yom Tov of Yaakov, till his Kavura, till he was formally buried after being mourned for 70 days, takes us, says the Chassam Sofer, to the first day of Chanukah. Again, showing this very strong connection between the Yom Tov of Sukkot and the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Sukkot is Keneged Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu passes away on Sukkot, and his mourning is completed on Chanukah, and actually he's buried 7 days after that, on the last day of Chanukah. So this teaches us that just like the Yom Tov of Sukkot, which is Man Simchaseinu, celebrates the return of the Shechinah, the Yom Tov of Chanukah too is paralleled after the Yom Tov of Sukkot. We celebrate the return of the Shechinah, both Yomim Tovim connected to the Bechir Shabbat Yaakov Avinu, and this time for real, wishing everyone a Freilich in Chanukah, a Lichtig Chanukah, and until next time.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.